Hello, you're watching Telecom TV. I'm Martin Warwick and I'm talking with Martin Thunman, the CEO of PacketFront. Martin Thunman, we're here at the Broadband World Forum in Paris, and one of the hot subjects here seems to be next generation networks. Now, we've heard an enormous amount about this over the past years, and everybody seems to have a different definition of what a next generation network is. Do you think that's correct?
Well, it is the case. Our view of the next generation network is that it is the final network, and the final network being completely limitless. And the only way to achieve that is to run optical fiber straight to the home. And there's a lot of different technologies out there that's talking about delivering IPTV and other services, but they all have limits that the industry is trying to get around. Whereas we believe that the final network is fiber all the way.
Now, you're calling this the final network. It's very, very dramatic stuff. Are you saying this is the last one we'll ever need?
Well, the reason why I call it the final network is that fiber has no limits in its capabilities on how much bandwidth you can give to home today. And you see that's the whole infrastructure around the world is built on fiber. So it's just the electronics that is limiting the speeds today, and we know from the history that they're pushing it to 10 gig, 40 gig, 160 gig. So basically with that it is in reality limitless. Obviously the fiber has a life length limitation, but that and how long that is, nobody really knows, but it's 20, 30 years. Then you can replace the fiber, and you can do that remotely.
So you're actually saying then that there's no technology after fiber optics?
That's a very good question. Well, right now we don't know anything that travels faster than light, and that's what's happening in this fiber optic cable. So I would have to answer. I think that's the case.
Okay, but who's going to pick up the cost for all this?
I think this is one of the big myths that are still in the industry, because building a fiber network is very intensive in terms of capital requirements. But for greenfield deployment, meaning new housing areas, the carriers say, and I've heard several carriers say, that they're actually cost neutral installing new copper lines or installing a fiber to a new housing. So which actually indicates that it's not in new housing areas, it's no difference. So we have about 1.5 million new homes in Europe being built every year. It should be regulated. Build fiber instead of copper. Boom, 1.5 million every year only there. On the existing plants, actually, there are studies that shows that it is a better business case running fiber to the home than to rent a line and do unbundled local loop. And the only issue here is access to capital. But once you have the capital, you dig down the fiber, the cost of depreciating that over 20-30 years gives you a monthly cost, which is actually lower than the cost of renting a ADSL line from the operator.
Okay, that sounds fine for new build. 1.5 million new houses a year in Europe. Big deal. Look at the cities that we have here, how old they are. How long is it going to take to fiber optic all of these? It's going to take generations, isn't it?
I think you're right. I do think it will take decades to get this type of network built. And we see that that's fine. It just has to take decades. And for us, PacketFront being involved in this business, we see that as a good thing for us as a company, because we believe that we have a long-term market to grow with.
Okay, you finally get the final network in place. Who will own it and who will manage it?
Yeah, it's a very good question actually, because if you look at different conferences or shows, the discussion goes more around telecom. It's a telecom service, or it's an entertainment network. But more and more cities and regions are starting to ask that same question. Is it maybe a strategic infrastructure? The impact of internet going down in a community is is huge. And it's kind of stopped businesses and has a lot of a big impact in many levels. So giving that away to a telco or to the cable operator and just sitting passively is something that more and more communities and cities are evaluating. And that's why you see cities like Vienna, Amsterdam, even Stockholm, Gothenburg taking more of an own approach to building these type of network. And they say, we will build the network, the fiber infrastructure, but then we will let everyone use that infrastructure the same way they've done with roads and bridges and airports, etc. And in a non-discriminating basis. And my view is that it is completely no sense to have multiple infrastructure, same way is that to have multiple competing airports in a city. You have one infrastructure, everyone uses it, it's well regulated, and it should be controlled by the public interest.
Well, look, let's take an example of BT. BT's building out its 21st century network. It's spending £10 billion in the UK alone to do that. They're not going to be very keen on handing it over lock, stock and barrel to somebody else for them to run and to make it completely open access. How are you going to convince them to do it?
Well, obviously I cannot speak for BT as a specific company, but generally when we speak to incumbent operators, the response is that they can't do it because the regulators don't allow them to do it, and it's not in their real interest because many of the incumbents have still a big retail part where they want to keep the most of their business, because opening this up would mean increased competition for the retail part, and that's not something that incumbents are very interested in typically.
Now, I'm sorry, I've got to come back to the question. How would you do it? What would you do? How would you go about it?
Well, what we're trying to do is to educate the market. We're trying to meet with regulators, the industry analysts and expert journalists and so on. Try to educate them on the prospects of the open access and the important what it could do to the society.
So who would this network belong to, and who would look after and manage it?
I think this is also a very important question. I think the best model would probably, in our mind, be some way of public-private partnership that is well regulated by the governments.
I'm intrigued by what you say, Martin, and I take some of your points, but it does sound hopelessly utopian. How are you going to convince incumbents just to hand over assets like this?
I think, first of all, I think most government did the wrong thing when they regulated and sold off the incumbents. They should have sold them in two pieces. One network piece and a services retail piece. But it's always difficult to take that back and would have to have a lot of political stamina to do that. And those are two things that don't come often together. But having said that, where we are seeing the movement is actually on the local government level, where cities and communities are actually taking the decisions to build these type of networks, and that's where it's starting. And obviously, over time, we foresee a consolidation. But for the next 5 years, we see this will be driven out of the city levels, and the incumbent will then be asked to join these networks as well as everyone else.
Martin Thunman, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.